Hello, guys. Welcome back to Time Under Tension. I'm coming at you with my co-host, Dee Davis. And today we are capping off our series on behavior change with your questions and answers. So last week we presented the opportunity to submit your answers to some questions regarding this topic. And I'm super excited for just the interactions and your answers, and I can't wait to kind of dig in. We're going to address some of your answers to these questions as case studies, kind of give you some examples of how you can move through the stages of behavior change with your particular habits, the ones that you're trying to instill, and the ones that you may be trying to break. So, first off, we post this podcast on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, as well as YouTube. Please be sure to like and subscribe to support the channel. And if you're interested in starting your own podcast, go through Buzzsprout. You can use the link in the show notes to get a $20 credit off your membership. So if podcasting has been on your heart, this is your time to get after it. It is so much fun, and I would highly encourage it. So over the past couple weeks, Steve, what have been maybe some of your favorite takeaways or big moments that we've talked about on this series on behavior change?
I think some of my favorite parts of both of our journeys, just expressing each other's growth through the behavior change cycle. But I think really just the truth that it takes time and you're going to relapse and that's okay. And really just getting fascinated about that. For me, the more and more I'm working with more clients who are high performers or people who really struggle with self sabotage in terms of their inner voice and the way in which they're handling certain behaviors they're trying to change, that frustration piece is really limiting and causes almost this disbelief in self that has created this overall sense of impossible for them to change. And so I think our podcast, one of the things I actually sent to a couple of my clients was our episodes and how we talk about just very truthfully and honestly, like we struggle. And it's about just getting fascinated in the process and really figuring out what is best in terms of the habits you're building or the routines in which you're making sure you're adhering to stay in that state of integrity. I'm curious what
I
your takeaways were.
I kind of want to run off of what you just
Okay.
said. I know we haven't talked about that exactly, but we do all struggle. And for those of us who are in roles where we are in management in our jobs, or people who are parents, or in some kind of position of authority, coaches, I think that it can feel like there's a lot of pressure around having everything together and not struggling. Like I've risen above all these things and now I'm going to teach others how to do it. But honestly, I think it's important to kind of surrender that and understand that we connect with people through that shadow, through that dark side, through those struggles, to say, hey, me too. You're not the only one who struggles with this. And here's some things I've learned. What have you learned along the way? And we're all just on this journey together and we all pick up different pieces of the truth. And that's why community is so important. That's why even like a podcast can be so important because it gives you an opportunity to spark a conversation with people who might have also seen glimpses of things that have worked well for them in working through behavior change, and people who maybe have made it a little farther along a similar journey. But in the end, we're all still working through things. And if we aren't struggling and overcoming, we're not growing, and then we're pretty much just dead. So if you're
Yes.
struggling, congratulations, you are alive, and that is
Yeah.
your path to thriving. So when we talk about breaking habits, instilling new behaviors, it's just a way to elevate your life. It's not something to inspire a sense of inadequacy or frustration like we talked about. And if you haven't heard that episode where we talk about fascination over frustration, I would highly recommend that because that was a really cool way that you reframed feeling a little bit stuck, feeling a little bit discouraged about where you're at, and learning to step away and use that to spark your curiosity as a springboard from which you can then move forward and progress.
Yeah.
So
Did
let's
you
kick
have
it
any other
off.
takeaways that you wanted to mention?
Other takeaways.
Yeah.
Um, I think one was being able to share my journey with energy drinks last week. I think it was really neat how that has helped me today. So today has been a tough day in terms of my cravings. It's really strange. I haven't quite figured out why yet. I am trying to be fascinated and not frustrated, but I just really crave them, and I've started going into my head like, well, it's been 38 days, you might as well just go what's the like you're an adult, you can be balanced. And I'm like, I committed to myself for 90 days. I'm gonna feel so bad if I don't like stick it out. And I really want this tattoo. So that is the end goal. But it was also knowing that I had this conversation with you all last week where I told you where I was at with it and how I really worked through this. And I think being able to put it out there and just share my journey, it gives me an extra little form of accountability where not that I feel the pressure of having to stick with something, because I don't think that's super productive, but I just feel a sense of responsibility to live out of a place of integrity. So having that conversation last week has definitely been something that I've gone back to today when I have considered slipping out of the maintenance phase into relapse.
Nice. I love that.
So first question we asked, I'm going to share my screen there for those of you who are watching on YouTube. We put this on our stories and we got some really great answers. So the first question we asked on Instagram was, what is a new habit you're trying to instill? And we got some really great answers here. We're not necessarily going to answer every single one, but I thought we could pick out some key ones each and kind of run through it. So Taylor said a skincare routine before bed. And I think that's a great one because it's super tangible. This is where I like to look at some of the strategies that James Clear offers in Atomic Habits, and he talks about habit stacking. So usually we have something we do consistently before bed, even if it's pulling back the sheets. Hopefully we're brushing our teeth. Hopefully we're winding down. Like there's some other habits that we have at night, but there's something that we're already doing that we can use as an anchor habit to then build off a new routine. So a skincare routine, I think first off is that planning phase of like, okay, I know I want to do this. What are the tools that I need? Do I have everything on hand? Okay, I've got my cleanser, I've got my toner, I have my moisturizer. Awesome. I want to use all three of these things. Well, first, make it easy. So keep it out on the counter in your environment. For those of us who are really type A and don't like stuff on the counter, that can be frustrating. But when you're first trying to instill a habit, make it super obvious so you have an automatic cue. Then it needs to be tied into another habit. So at night, say you brush your teeth, the next immediate thing that you would do is your skincare routine. So putting your skincare product right next to your toothbrush is an easy way to do that. And for me, I really like the fulfillment of checking boxes. So I like to have little checklists. Um, and that gives me an opportunity to kind of check off and make sure that I'm doing all the habits that I've committed to. So having maybe a checklist on like posted on your bathroom mirror where you can check off like whatever things you're trying to add to your evening routine. So you get that sense of satisfaction and it gives you some kind of data that you can track and review over a series of the week or perhaps the month. And you can kind of see, all right, how consistent am I with this habit until it becomes actually habitual?
Yeah, that's so good. You mind if I jump in and start one here?
Go for it.
I'm gonna choose Tanya, who said not trying to fix issues for others all the time. And the reason I want to choose that one is because I felt like that was a very similar struggle that I went through personally, especially being, we were just talking about two on the Enneagram. I'm very others focused, and I feel my purpose is very connected to helping others, guiding others, being a mirror of reflection for others, and helping them get from where they are to where they want to be, really uprooting some of the struggle they're in, stay, be knowing I'm outside that wrestling match and can step in and help guide essentially the next move. And I think fixing issues was something initially when I first got into coaching in this way as a mental performance coach and a life coach, that I almost felt like I needed to fix the problems to feel like I was doing them the service that they were paying me for. When really a lot of the time, if we insert trying to fix other people's problems, they're not getting the empowerment of fixing them on their own. And so I had to shift my perspective on what me fixing the issues was actually doing to them and their own personal journey. So for Tanya, who, I think we're very similar people, trying to fix issues for other people all the time can lead to disempowerment. And having that, again, when we're in that preparation phase or that contemplation stage of really trying to attach a deeper purpose or a mission to what it is that we want to do, that new habit, it's understanding that when we can really emphasize the empowerment of others, that's what we really want to do when we're fixing. It's empowerment. It's understanding that if we come in and fix all the time, then the other person is never actually going to be able to change the behavior themselves. So I found that really ensuring that understanding my role and my responsibility is just to be a sounding board, to allow someone to feel heard, to allow someone to feel like someone is with them along the way, but not trying to fix the problem, knowing that the goal is empowerment of others. So as you're really working through this new habit, it something that I did, a tangible action item that I did was start to ask the other person, do you want me to just listen or do you want me to provide feedback? It's offering that person an opportunity to feel heard and seen. If they just want to let out what it is that they're struggling with and kind of get there on their own, I can ask prompting questions that lead them from that place of being outside the wrestling match. But if I ask the person, they're like, yes, I do want feedback, then that inserts this place where you actually can apply some knowledge that that feels like you're helping them essentially fix the issue.
And I think two arenas in which this can be really helpful is, and I can only say this from a distance. I always want to disclaim that because I am not a parent and I do not pretend to be one, and I really admire parents. But I think for parents, being someone who has parents, I felt like sometimes um, my mom specifically was very quick to try to fix everything for me. And
Mhm.
at some point, that prevented me from being able to step up and face the responsibilities that I needed. And so it became really difficult when I was completely on my own, having to face things because I didn't have a sense of competency in those areas. So understanding that you're giving the greatest gift, which is growth, when you're there to support someone and walk beside them and you're not trying to carry them through it. And I think that
Mhm.
also can be really helpful in a relationship. And I've learned that a lot with you. Something you're great at, like you said, is asking that question. Do you want me to listen or do you want feedback? And I learned that there are times I appreciate when you ask that, because when you don't and you go into feedback mode, which you're not, that's not something you really do. But I get kind of pissed because I'm like, I'm not asking. You just need to like, don't tell me what to do. Like, I just go into complete defense mode. When you offer it like a question, even if the outcome is still that you're going to give me advice, because I say, yes, I'd like to hear your feedback, I got to make that choice. And then,
Right.
like you said, I'm feeling empowered in the situation in which normally, if I'm coming to you with it, I probably don't feel that much power to begin with. So you gave me that gift of being able to move into this struggle or overcoming an obstacle with a higher sense of confidence and strength.
Mhm. That's a great point. I think something that, that you mentioned earlier about a skincare routine and habit stacking really can also encourage hashtag and Paul in balancing time, because you're talking about a night routine, and that really sparked in my mind the balance of time is really having those morning and night routines established, set in stone in your calendar. For me, I really struggled balancing my time because I almost felt restricted by a calendar, by scheduling,
Mm.
as if that was going to limit my ability to have that flow in my day. And something that you mentioned to me really early on in this journey, personally for me, Liv, was when you told me that the blocks of time I'm allotting myself in the day can be very broad. Like this is a work block, and this is my morning routine block where I don't have my phone turned on, and this is when I'm going to bed, and this is my block of free time. Once you actually schedule something, it becomes real. That's what Tony Robbins says a lot. Like once you schedule it, it becomes real. So the balance of my time massively improved because I set myself up well for the day with my morning routine. I knew what I needed to do in the first hour and a half I was awake, and that is to get really set in stone on my devotionals in the morning, not touch my phone or look at any sort of work related email, social media, nothing. Very devoted time in the morning to set myself up well. And then I know, okay, awesome. I get up at 6. I'm at the gym by 7:30. I'm home by 9. I'm eating by 9:30 or 10. And that is my morning block. I have it set. Nothing gets in my way in that time, but I know I can check all of that off the list. Now it's like I understand that I have this meeting at noon, this call at 2, and this call at 4. Okay, awesome. Well, I have 10:30 to noon. I have a block there, and making sure I'm scheduling out, okay, this is when I'm going to do creative content. Now I have a time frame, and in that time frame is my devoted time where I get to work on creative content. And having your priorities set in the day, that's another thing you mentioned, is when you have your top 3 priorities, that having your 3 priorities and then having your if I have more time priority list or to-do list underneath really helps to visualize what is significant to you in that day that you need to get done. So blocking off those hour allotments of time in the day allow you to have the flow within that time block. Say it was creative content. It's not like you're scheduling out every single reel you need to make. It's, hey, flow with whatever you want to create in this time. And then you know you're going to be ready to prep for your 12 o'clock call. You're good. Then let's say I have my 5 till 7 p.m. allotted free time. Now I know that I have whatever I want to do in this time. It's scheduled though. So I have time set aside for me to do my free time, which not only gives me more intentionality to want to do like the things I want to do because I only have this amount of time, but it's keeping me on track with my meals. Then I eat at 7, and then I, spend my night with you and go to bed by 10. So I just think really incorporating some of the things you've taught me, but again, that night routine you mentioned earlier about habit stacking in that space, it's really cool for time management as well because you're able to really section off the priorities in your day that make you feel accomplished, but you also have your free time scheduled and your morning and night routine scheduled.
So good. I think that idea of overwhelm is something I've really battled with as someone who has naturally a lot of anxiety. I can get into that state of overwhelm really quickly, but I heard someone phrase it like overwhelm is being irresponsible. And that shifted my perspective. Like, overwhelm is you not being clear on your values and your priorities. It's not about other people putting stuff on your plate. It's about you not understanding what is most important in your life. And that's totally up to you. And there's a book called Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And he talks about it's kind of like a grid, and there's things that are urgent, things that are important, things that are uh, urgent and important, and that is where you want to be spending your time. Like those things that need to be done now, and they are important to get done now. Not just what's urgent, not like, oh, well, this person needs this and this needs to do this, and I've got DMs and I've got text messages and emails are coming in, and my boss wants me to do this today, and my kid needs help with it. It's like, no, what's important? Okay, well, my kid's project is probably the most important. Awesome. Put that on the calendar first. Like things can, you need to prioritize and schedule based on your priorities, like you're saying, because just thinking, I'm going to get everything done for everybody all the time, you're going to run yourself into the ground, and it's irresponsible, and it's your responsibility as a steward of your life and your time to be using it wisely. And there will be things that maybe can't get done today, but those things that are maybe important, but they're not urgent, what day on the calendar could you put those on? Like, go ahead and schedule them out. Be like, all right, like for me, I don't really want to like go apply for my car registration. That sounds like an absolute hassle, but it is important. It's not really urgent right now because it's not due till March. So I put it on my calendar for a day when I don't have anything else scheduled. It's literally on a time block, so no one else can schedule anything over it. And I know it's there. And now I can release it out of my brain and I'm not stressed about it. And it's not unnecessarily getting scheduled today because I feel like it's
Mhm.
urgent when it's actually not urgent. It just needs to be done by this future date. So starting to separate things in your life between like things that aren't important and aren't urgent, they might never need to get done. Period.
Mhm.
Like they're just not a priority. And as you get older and you have more responsibilities, you have to be more diligent about understanding and clarifying what your priorities and values are so that this doesn't get you into that state of overwhelm or this state of um, just decision fatigue because you're trying to fit in everything all the time and not really doing anything effectively.
So good. Do we want to move on to the next question?
Let's see. Yeah, we can come back to this because there are some good ones here if we need to. But next one is, what is a behavior in your life that is not serving you?
Mm.
Awesome. So I'm gonna jump on this one by Tanya, who said, being so fastidious about having a clean house. I grew up in a very, very tidy, neat household where, like, as kids, we were like literally like scrubbing the baseboards with toothbrushes. Like, we had like very specific chores for the week, chores for the month, chores for the quarter, and towels had to be folded a certain way. Like, that was just the household. And I adopted a lot of that, being super type A. And you talked about the Enneagram being a type 1 on the Enneagram. I love that. And I find a lot of peace in creating structure in my external environment. What I've learned is you are not like that. And being in a relationship, I've had to learn the balance of like, okay, what is important to me? You know, is it really important to me that the towels are always folded one way? No, not really. But I like having the bowls here. So learning to compromise on things like that because there is a sense of peace I have when there's structure that makes my day flow a little bit better because things are organized. But releasing some of that need to be super anal about it, that isn't necessary. And really, to me, borders on being controlling over just being like efficiently organized. And I think also having ways to apply that structure that gives me a sense of control in things that are just mine. So, like, I really like to have a day planner and I like to plan out my days and I like to have my habits in there and I keep everything very organized in my client folders. So, like, cleaning up the environment that is mine and helps me live my life more effectively, but not projecting that onto other people and not allowing that to build into a frustration when I feel like other people don't prioritize it the same way that I do, and
Mhm.
understanding it's not right or wrong, but that it's just a preference of mine. And if I need to ask someone to meet me in the middle, like, hey, could we put the forks here instead? Like, I know that if someone really cares about me, they may be able to meet me there and they might appreciate that opportunity to show me love in that way. But lastly, besides meeting other people in the middle, I think it's important to give yourself a little bit of leeway with how clean things need to be. Like, again, finding a balance where is this something that's stealing from your time every single day? That's where it's important to get really clear on your priorities. Because if that's, say, cutting into the time that you would be spending maybe journaling or maybe calling a friend, I think it's important to weigh which is more important to you. And perhaps there's an opportunity to stack things. Like sometimes while I'm cleaning, that's when I call my mom, and it gives me a great opportunity to do something mindless, but also connect with someone. So can it become something that fills your soul a little bit more than just trying to like scramble and organize your environment so you feel some internal sense of peace?
Yeah, that's so good. I love hearing that just from someone who's not that way, learning about you in that way. It's really important to have that conversation because you really could be with someone who just doesn't even remotely think about those things detail oriented in that way. So I love that. I love that advice that you gave. I think one of the ones that I want to choose, there's two here that are somewhat similar in my personal journey, the nighttime snacking or eating outside of just hunger, and then the currently fighting the habit of binge eating. To me, that is where the binging happened for me at night. So I'm gonna tie those two together just because I feel like they can be somewhat similar in their nature. So really the first thing that brought that to my attention was at night, I found myself feeling unsafe initially. Like in the very first parts of my journey with binging, it started out differently than it showed up later on. And the first thing I realized I needed to address was at night, I found myself eating because it brought a sense of filling, like fullness, where I was feeling super empty. So, in my realm of life that I was in at the time, I had this emptiness inside of me that I wanted to desperately fill. And that showed up with, partying initially. It showed up trying to find, someone to spend my life with. And it was all external. And then to the point where when COVID happened, it turned into snacking, like nighttime eating was this thing that I started to do outside of hunger because it felt like I was trying to fill that void within. And once I realized that I was snacking to almost dissociate and numb from the pain I was feeling internally, once I came to that realization that that's what I was trying to do, I was able to sit with that discomfort and realize for me personally, it was that I was actually unsafe in my own body. That's how I felt just because I hadn't spent the time going inward to make my safe place inside of me. It was my safe place was always a physical location that I couldn't always go to or another person that I couldn't always be with. And I found that really sitting with the discomfort and asking myself the questions. When I say asking myself, I mean I actually had conversation with my body at this time where I'm asking my body, how do you feel right now? What is it that you need? And why is food something that I feel the need to turn to? So again, that fascination piece removed this, oh well, I'm just falling into it again and might as well just do it because I already started eating kind of thing. Or but this is kind of the routine I've gotten into where I just have a couple snacks at night and I always tell myself I'm just gonna stop. But I never end up doing that. I never ended up breaking the behavior because I was just trying to think my way out of it. And that habit of binge eating as well further along the way, which is why I kind of want to speak to Heather's. I realized that there was so much more going into it that was data driven. And some of the things I needed to start ask like those questions about getting fascinated really helped me understand, well, because I binged the night before, I'm waiting till 4 or 5 p.m. at night to eat again. And I'm killing myself in the gym, doing tons of cardio, working out, feeling so much shame. Then I'm telling myself I'm not eating again later that night. And I would be so hungry at that time because I just starved myself all day thinking I didn't need to consume any more calories because I was binging. Then all of a sudden I was like, okay, well, I'll eat something. And now I'm falling right back into that pattern again at night where I wasn't actually taking into consideration maybe my body literally thinks I'm in a famine because I'm not feeding it. And really starting to connect with my body, if I starve all day, of course it's going to respond by wanting to eat a lot at night. And it just led to this repeated pattern of behavior that I could never break until I was actually able to step outside of the behavior, get fascinated, remove that shame and guilt feeling from it, thinking I couldn't change, thinking this was just a part of who I was and this is just more parts of this eating disorder I'm in. It's like, no, what's actually happening? well, I'm definitely not sleeping because of what binging is doing to my ability to optimally reach a state of rest. And then also starving myself the next day, what I needed to do was I needed to break that pattern. That's where I needed to insert myself a new action step. And the action step was to eat by 10 a.m. I needed to eat a breakfast by 10 a.m. and then make sure I was eating repeatedly 3 to 4 hours for the rest of the day, making sure that I had a meal that I really enjoyed as my last meal that gave me a little bit of sweet, that oats and protein meal, and then really going to bed at 10 p.m. and honoring that. It was understanding that there was so much that I wasn't considering because I was just stuck in that shame cycle of my in my head thinking I just need to be better. I just need to have willpower. I just need to be stronger. Telling myself all
Mm.
these things instead of really just empathizing with like what is going on? Like, am I struggling with something else in my life where I feel empty? And so this just feels like I'm consuming something just to heal the pain. So I'm numbing out with food and eating outside of hunger to feel like I'm healing something. Or am I starving myself all day? My body thinks it's in a famine. Then, of course, when I start eating stuff, I'm going to eat a lot more at night. And then it leads to this same cycle again of binge and shame. So it was addressing everything else because I was able to get out of shame. It's like separating yourself from what's really happening, taking a scientist perspective and saying, well, what's happening? Like what is really the data going on? And if I was working with somebody who was doing something similar, what advice would I give them? Because usually that's what I also need to give myself in that moment.
That's so great. And knowing both of these ladies, you're both competitors and you're in a sport that really triggers a lot of disorder. If you've been starving, which that's what contest prep is, for months on end, your hormones that communicate hunger in your body are off. So knowing that, that's data. Give yourself some grace with that process of reversing and knowing it doesn't look the same for everybody. You know, there's people who reverse out of a show and they don't usually have a lot of issues with food to begin with and they may not have any issues. And then there's people who struggle with binging for months and months on end after it. So just give yourself some grace and kind of know your patterns. But one more thing that was kind of helpful when I thought about binging in my own life, and even if it wasn't like maybe diagnosable binging, like binge eating disorder, like I would have a free meal sometimes and would just go absolutely crazy. Like I would plan it ahead of time and then like make sure I could have like pizza and tacos and ice cream and just like it made it like
Mm,
this huge feast. Is I heard someone say that we're trying to put things in our mouth because we're not letting things out. And I was thinking yesterday for the first time I was at the grocery store and I passed by the ice cream and I thought, do I want ice cream? I'm like, no, not really. And then I realized I still have two half pints in my fridge. And I realized that a year ago, 2 years ago, especially, there is no way in heck I would be able to not finish a pint and not and have it in the freezer for a couple weeks without even thinking about it. No way. It would have been on my mind. I would have had to have finished it. And I thought, why don't I struggle with food anymore? Like, why don't I think about binging? And what really hit me yesterday was like, because you're using your voice. Because in every other area of your life, you feel this sense of control and intentionality about what you're doing and who you're showing up as. Like, I'm not pushing myself down anymore and then needing something that's just mine that I can just have and just let myself loose on and just be like, well, this is the only thing. Like, this is the only thing that I let myself like just have and don't have to be so controlling. It was like because you feel like you can open up in every area and just be fully yourself. And I don't necessarily know that it's that complicated for everyone, but I thought that was like a neat tie-in that might be helpful as well because you said like think about the other things as well. Like think about the psychological aspect of it and what else is driving that behavior outside of just like lack of willpower, because that is very
Mhm.
rarely the actual problem.
Mhm.
I think another one here that I thought was a great one was this thinking that I need to stay up late at night just to have me time once the kids go to bed. Man, now again, I don't have kids, but when I was nursing, I definitely did this. And when I would get done when I was working day shifts and I would have my like whatever 12 to sometimes like 13, 14-hour shift, just depending, man, I would come home and I would stay up so late if I didn't have a shift the next day because I was like, this is my time. I finally get to do what I want. And what I learned over time is that was kind of this form of self-sabotage because then I would just feel really cruddy and it would mess up my sleep cycle. And I had to learn like sometimes I just need to take those breaks throughout the day and try not to make it like this dramatic thing. Like maybe I don't get a full 30-minute lunch because that's not always realistic. And when you're a parent, you're on the clock all the time. So maybe it's not realistic to have like an hour to yourself. But I started getting up a little bit earlier and gave myself like 30 minutes in the morning where I could drink coffee and read or scroll or whatever I wanted to do that was just my time. And then by the time I got to work, I kind of feel like I had already given myself some time. And then throughout the day, if I had opportunities, to maybe have a great conversation with a coworker, or at the end of my day on the way home, like turn on some music I really like and maybe stay in my car an extra 5 minutes. Like, where in your day can you leverage an extra 5 or 10 minutes? Can you get up a little bit earlier just to have a few minutes to yourself? Doesn't have to be this long extended me time or hit this wall where you're just like, I'm going on a vacation, I gotta go. Yeah, we need that sometimes, but we gotta make sure we're giving ourselves a little bit of self-care and understand that when you're doing that, you're setting an example for your kids that taking care of yourself and taking some time to be quiet and alone is really important. So find some times in your day that you can leverage for just having a little bit of you time. And then maybe just give yourself a little time at night, but set a cap on it. So you're still getting that time. You're not saying you're not allowed, but you know that it's going to be in your best interest if you go to bed by say 10. So can you have that like 30 minutes at night that's just yours?
Yeah, and I do wanna comment on that too because I loved your point about just the binge eating piece about not using your voice essentially. And this is something that I've struggled with that I used to do a lot with you, was I would stay up later even if I was tired than you because I felt like that was the only me time I could get. But what I realized was that I was scared to ask you for it because I thought you'd be offended, like you thought I was didn't wanna spend time with you, but that's not really the case. It's about prioritizing the time that I need for me to show up as my best self for you. And I just wasn't using my voice. So it was like the only time I thought it would come from a place of, well, I'm not sacrificing any time with you or making you feel like I don't want to hang out. This is just me being able to, this is just my way that I need to do that. Instead of like, no, I need to prioritize my sleep because, like we just talked about, when I stay up late and watch TV, it leads to me eating too much or just the potential for that to happen. That was an aspect of my time that I knew this potential habit could insert itself that I needed to replace with a healthy habit of sleep. But I was then like, well, I don't really want to go to sleep because I don't feel like I had my time today. So it was like, wow, okay, I need to use my voice here. I need to be able to ask you, hey, can I have 30 minutes when I get home from work to just, can we just coexist with each other? That's what we call it. Like, let's just coexist with each other. It's not that I don't want to be around you, I just don't want to talk. And I want to just be able to decompress my thoughts before I actually enter into a conversation with you. So just making sure you're also identifying if you're not using your voice with your partner or with people that you a roommate or something, whoever is in your immediate environment, after work, most of the time is where this happens. Being able to use your voice and say, "Hey, I just need 30 minutes or so right now, and I'll go to bed with you then." At the same time, that is something that really allowed me to get my other behavior in check in a way, I guess protect my energy by going to bed at an hour that I set for myself, and then also get the time that I needed in the day.
That's great. Yeah, I think using your voice is going to be a big one in a lot of these areas. All right. What's a habit you're trying to break? So only a few here, but I think these are really good. So
Mm.
my girl Margaret said scrolling through Instagram. I think that is something a lot of people struggle with, and it usually gets to the point where people are like, I'm taking a break, like delete Instagram, or if they're in maybe Lent, they decide like, all right, I'm gonna take this time off of social media. And that's great, but it kind of goes back to that free time thing where you just have to eventually go on vacation because you're not asking for what you need throughout the day. We gotta have self-discipline. And I don't mean that in like a, you lack willpower kind of way. But like when you recognize that you're doing a behavior that doesn't serve you, I think asking yourself, what is it doing for you? It's doing something for you. So everyone's different. For me, scrolling gives me something very mindless to do. It makes me feel occupied when I may not feel super comfortable about just being still. It may give me something to focus on when I'm not really wanting to face my feelings. And sometimes it can be just a fun thing, but is it taking up too much of my time? So I think understanding why is it an issue for you? Because nothing is really that bad inherently. Some things are. Don't do drugs. But scrolling, being on social media, it can be positive. It can give you an opportunity to learn about training or mental health or connecting with friends. It can give you inspiration or show you some beautiful places around the world. Like there's joy that you can find in it. It has its perks. But why is it now becoming a habit that doesn't serve you? Is it taking too much of your time? Is it triggering comparison? I feel like that's a really
Mm.
tough one. And that's one
Mhm.
that most of us fall prey to, especially when our Instagram feed is just full of like fitness influencers. So I think that understanding one, why it's not serving you, but then understanding how is it serving you? So is it giving you something to do when you're feeling kind of bored? Is it giving you a distraction when you're not wanting to face your feelings? And what is an alternative behavior that would also fill that need? Because you're going to need to do something instead. So finding like when you pull out your phone and you find like that automatic, I'm going to go to Instagram, one, kind of like the facial care stuff, put it in front of you, take it away, take it off of your home screen. Not necessarily delete it, but what if it's not in your home screen so it's not right in front of your face every time you open your phone? That's an easy
Mm.
thing. Put it on your back page of your phone. Um, I know that there's apps that can help you track the time that you spend on social media. There's even apps that will shut it off if you've been on there too long. So there's things like that. But I think that intentionality around, okay, this is how much time I'm going to spend on it in a day. Or like you said, if you're scheduling a time block for your free time, maybe you allow yourself 30 minutes of scrolling. So you know you still get to do it, right? As long as you're doing things, scrolling things that aren't affecting your mental health negatively.
Mhm.
So maybe set some boundaries around that, but allow yourself a time block to have it. Just like kids get recess in the middle of the day. Recess isn't that long, but they know they get it every single day. So it kind of helps with that antsy feeling of like, oh, I want to do this. I want to go have fun. Awesome. You want to schedule some fun into your day. It is a priority for you, is what you're saying. Then put it on your schedule, within a certain time block.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. I think your point about if it's serving you, is just so key there because I think I talked about numbing earlier, but to your point, if scrolling is a numbing action or a comparison action, that's really, really challenging for you to really connect yourself to your highest, highest self, but also just your intuition. So I just
Mhm.
love that point. I thought you did a great job of explaining that. Um, the one that I kind of want to talk about is the negative self-talk. And I've been reading this book, Tools, and there's another book called Coming Alive. That's the second book to this. And what they do in Coming Alive is they identify what is part X. That's what they call it, part X. And the point of part X is that identifying the part of you that tries to self sabotage, identify the part of you that's speaking a lot of negativeness towards you, like I'm not enough. See, no one wants to stay with you. You're never good enough to achieve the things that you set your mind to. Stuff like the deep, deep self-sabotage, the negative self-talk, they call that part X. And so it gives that part of you that really tries to disrupt your growth and disrupt the change and really disrupt your life force, the thing that's going to bring you into your highest self, to shine your light, to take courageous steps forward, to actually change behavior and believe that you can. This part, if you can start to identify this part, not only when it shows up, but what it says and at what points in time you're finding yourself identifying with part X, all of a sudden you get to create the separation of the negative self-talk in your mind is a part of you that's trying to keep you stuck. It's trying to keep you in the past. It's not allowing you to enter into the present moment, see what happened in the past as a way to learn, and then be able to expand yourself into the growth, into the person that you know you can be and want to be. So that was just something I wanted to share because when we can start to identify a part of us as really bringing in a ton of negativity, it separates us from that part. It really starts to create almost a I don't want to say a fun game because it's definitely not fun to hear what it is that you're saying to yourself with the negative self-talk and the self-sabotage. But when you can identify that the thoughts are in there, you can put an image or a thing or call it part X out in front of you. And now all of a sudden you know that you're not the negative person. You're not that negative self-talk. What is being said to you is not true. So it's like, nope, part X is starting to come in my mind. That is not who I am. I already know negative self-talk does nothing besides hold me in the past and limit me from being present with anybody that I'm with, or allow me to even be in the present where change happens. The present moment is where change happens. That's where we
Mm.
have action. That's the only point in time that we fully control what it is that we're going to do. So if we're stuck in the past, now all of a sudden part X is like robbing us from our ability to go into the future and create change that leads us to that life of fulfillment and happiness and joy and peace and love, you know? So I loved that. And it really sparked in my brain, like really got in there when I saw negative self talk because I say a lot about this fascination over frustration. But what's the most helpful in my own personal journey was identifying my parts and being able to separate myself, my highest self, from each individual part and just see that part for what it is, whether it's protecting me from something because it's a trauma related part. That part is just trying to protect me because they can't see what's really the environment I'm in. They're only analyzing the familiarity to a past traumatic experience. But that self-sabotage part, that's always in high performers where they're, you're setting unrealistic expectations and not meeting them. All of a sudden now this part X that's inside of you decides it's going to take over your mind and say that you aren't enough and you can never do this and you can never do that. And now you're stuck in this feeling of impossible, like I talked about earlier, instead of being able to separate and be like, part X does not get to control me anymore.
Mm.
I know that I want to make change. I want to instill new habits. I want to bring in positive self talk, show compassion for myself. So the second I start to hear a negative thought, it's like, oh, that's part X. That's not me. That's this other part of me that's trying to keep me from growth. So let me make sure that that part steps out. What do I really need right now? I need some self compassion because I fell back into a binge last night and I'm really sad about it, and it really hurts me right now. But I know that if I take the action step of making sure I eat properly in the day, earlier in the day, refocus yourself on what you can do right now in the present moment to make change instead of living in the past. Now all of a sudden part X is left behind and you're all of a sudden on this upward trajectory, new path to an entirely new and expansive self that really feels like most aligned with your truth and integrity.
I love that. I think that is such a great perspective, being able to separate that voice from yourself. sometimes I think even maybe recognizing where that voice came from to begin with. A lot of times it's not our voice, we know it's not our truest self, but where did we first hear that? If you're telling yourself that you're a failure, you're never going to amount to anything, like when was the first time you believed that? Did someone speak that into your life? And I think when you start to recognize that that's not your voice at all, like, so you can decide if it's something you're going to accept or not. Um, Tony Robbins talks about this example of driving a car and it spinning out, and how if you as you're spinning out, you're driving beside a wall if you're in a race car. Like your tendency is going to be to turn and look at the wall, but every time you turn to look at the wall, you're going to direct the car towards the wall. So you need to keep your eyes on the track in front of you. And I think understanding that every time we get distracted by our fear or our doubts about ourselves, we kind of drive in that direction. So if we say like, I never even keep my promises. Like I'm just someone, I never show up when I say I'm going to. You're kind of giving yourself the opportunity to even do that. And I'm not
Hmm.
saying that from like it's not about blame. It's not about blaming yourself. It's just like I've been there and I've let myself have so many free passes in a way to just not show up as the person I want to be, because I just decided beforehand that I'm just not that person. I'm like,
Mm.
well, this is never gonna amount to anything. Like, I'm never gonna be able to just coach and leave nursing. Like, that's just never gonna happen. And so I just didn't pour my all into coaching for a long time because I just didn't believe that I could do it. I took someone else really pushing me. And then I had to learn over time I couldn't just depend on other people pushing me. Like, yeah, it's nice when someone else tells me, like, hey, you're doing a really good job, or like, you're a great coach. I love working with you. You like changed my life. Like, that's awesome. But I have to believe that to begin with, because that belief is going to drive me. And if I'm constantly focused on where I feel like I'm falling short as a coach, because I know I can
Mm.
always get better, then I'm going to start to fall into this spiral of like self-deprecation and finding evidence in every area around me as to why I'm the worst coach in the world. Even though that's not accurate and it's not true, and
Mhm.
it honestly does everything but drive me to better behavior. So if I can instead look for evidence of where I am showing up, like, hey, I did this really well today. Awesome. Maybe tomorrow I could do this really well. That's why I have clients celebrate wins every single day, even on those days that suck. How did you show up for yourself today? Because I promise you did it in one area. And that's your proof right there that you can do it in another area. You have to start looking for that evidence and understand that every thought that you choose to believe, you're programming yourself with that thought. That's your power. You get that
Right,
power. So that thought that comes through, you got to stop it and you got to go, does this serve me or not? And then you get to decide. And if it doesn't, you're like, not my voice. That's part X, putting it away. Or you could say,
right.
all right, I believe that about myself. Let's roll with that. Whatever. That's how we create ourselves every single day.
Yeah, I wanna take one more step with that and making sure that as people, we are the quote is, "When we're born, we're essentially the result of our parents, like, we look like our parents, but when we die, we look like our choices, essentially. The choices that we
Mm,
make are that is what can that is what we are when we die, is the choices that we made, and the thoughts that come up, I love that you're talking about when there's a thought, we got to get in there and break it. But the thing that is most important in my mind as well, like the next step with that is you need to have an action. You need to perform action. It cannot stop in your thoughts. It has to be, okay, yes, I know that thought doesn't serve me, but now what am I going to do? Because usually when those thoughts come up, they're not it's not like we'll ever get rid of having negative thoughts. They're gonna come up. It's gonna be something that we have to consistently battle. And in that moment, the best way to start, like you're saying, to remove those thoughts and what you are becoming to like actually believe about yourself is to take action steps that that part of you would not take, because then now you're choosing these actions regardless of how you feel, regardless of the thought that you think, and your truth becomes your actions. Your truth doesn't become the thoughts that you think. So again, you're having a little bit more even further separation. from part X because you're taking the action that that part of you is trying to keep you from taking.
I love that. I think that's one thing I do is ask myself, like, what would my highest self do here? What would my ideal self do in this situation? And then I just decide to do that thing. And,
Hmm.
it's not about whether or not you fail or succeed at the attempt. It's the attempt itself that really matters because you're proving to yourself that you are that kind of person. And that's really where the deeper change happens. This was great. I really appreciate you guys being so um, just so active in asking these questions and answering and just sharing some of your struggles with transparency and the courage of vulnerability that just shows how strong you are and your dedication to growth. It's been really fun to kind of talk through this and get some of your insight into what can be challenging and how you're trying to better your life and know that we're just all in this together, just flailing around doing the best we can, but it's a fun journey. So this was the end of our behavior change series. And as Dee and I move into a really exciting and maybe even challenging period in our lives where we're going to be moving across the country in about 2 weeks and going through a lot of different transitions with that. Our next series is going to be on transitions and going through these life phases where a lot is changing and how you maintain your sense of self in that, the challenges that you face in that, and then setting like a new baseline as you move through a transitional period in life so that you can come back to stability and maintain your sense of self. So, thank you guys so much for listening, for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. Comment below anything else that you'd like to see. If you have any insight on transitional periods or anything you want to hear about, definitely comment below. Um, thank you for all your support throughout this series. I hope this has been helpful for you, and we will catch you next time on Time Under Tension.